So why are you quitting WoW?
It's 4 years, man. 4 years playing one goddamn game over and over again. I'm done with it. This expansion was so hard.
That sucks.
The guild died, well, nearly died like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
People left and burned out, having to raid all the time.
Yeah. So not even another expansion will bring you back to WoW?
Well, what's it going to be? More levels, more zones, more raids, same shit over and over and over again.
Right. You are aware that Arthas is in the next expansion?
Fuck.
Yeah, mate.
Hey,
What's going on?
Mario Kart.
Let's do it.
Let's do it, right?
The hunger your weapon feels.
Not today. Monster, bruv.
Yeah, mate.
Did you truly expect
Why?
to fulfill Brain's task on a I delight.
What's up with you? Fuck's sake, should we just go and get Wrath? Hey! Hey, come on, big guy! Come on, let's go and get Wrath. That'll cheer you up.
Fine, so Arthas was on our brains and we had to go and buy all the Wrath of the Lich Kings. I think we actually got 5, but you took your copy home, mate.
I did, mate.
Looking back though, memory lane, boys. That's the one I bought to join Method. 18 quid cash. So, let's go and see Arthas in every cutscene ever made. Dramatic walk away. TBC's ending was soul-crushing for many. The enormous drought of content since the Black Temple and the Sunwell was just too much, and as the sun set on the Crusade, player fatigue was evident. WoW wasn't dropping subs. In fact, it was still rising, but at a far more steady rate than ever before. Who knows how long the Warcraft 3 legend was in the making. Perhaps it was on the roadmap for years, but nevertheless, this is the story everyone had been hoping for since WoW itself was announced. Cliché as the Arthas story is, who cares? This is the story that hooked millions of people to the Warcraft universe. Can you imagine what it must have been like to sit there at BlizzCon 2007, knowing a new WoW expansion is about to be announced, to be there for that one historical moment of having Arthas appear on screen, that level of excitement? Well, I imagine it would have been cool, mate, if everything hadn't leaked 2 days before. We even had the box art, a full feature list, Death Knights, the whole shebang. It was ruined. Blizzard knew it. They even had to acknowledge it on stage.
Alright, so live content updates are pretty cool. Live content updates are cool, but the dev team's been working on something much more special than that. Now I know there's always rumors on the internet. Who's been reading rumors on the internet and thinks they know what I'm about to talk about?
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again.
Okay, keep your hands up. Your accounts are all banned.
It's alright though. You know why?
Death Knights, hero class. What does it mean? I don't know. Death Knights, Death Grip, Death Decay, Death. death reroll or you might die.
Before that, though, was the Wrath pre-event. Depending on who you ask, though, it was either amazing or the worst thing ever. It also serves, in my opinion, as a sense of humor test. If it happened today, I can only imagine the amount of cringe spam from gamers who get uncomfortable at anything slightly out of the ordinary. The plague was released, cities were overrun with undead, players were able to turn any other player into a mindless zombie at will. So for a little while, the major cities were a no-go. Maybe I was being harsh on those who hated it, but honestly, it fit the theme of an unstoppable invasion really, really well. There was nothing you could do to prevent the spread, which was the fucking point, and the eeriness of walking over literally hundreds of corpses. It was a sight to behold. However, the complaining was rife. The people could not be without their auction house, and the event was cut short. Blizzard pulled the plug early, and this all lasted, and its historical rage lasted for 5 days. 5 days, and the invasion was over. Blizzard had learned from the TBC launch. Now players had a couple of zones to start their journey. Instead of being funneled into a single zone with no quest mobs, and the zones were interesting. I know it's subjective, but the design of the Wrath zones actually rivaled the beauty of TBC for me, particularly Icecrown and the Storm Peaks. Talking of the Storm Peaks then, what a tremendous idea. Flying existed, and it wasn't this creative burden it is today, so they embraced it. They locked it off till 77, not only via the skill being unavailable, but by geographically sealing off the later zones until you gained flying, similar to how they locked off the floating city till midway through leveling. With that in mind, the Storm Peaks and Icecrown were fully designed with flying as a feature, with the enormous looming and imposing towers ominously present in all directions. We haven't seen anything like this since then, especially with the efforts of Blizz to actually remove flying. I really wish they would re-embrace this feature of the game, instead of trying to lock it in the basement. Just think about Northrend's overall world design. I guarantee it carries more memorable locations in the minds of players than any other continent, including the Broken Isles. Be it the traversal into Coldara, the gorgeous intricate spire of Dragonblight contrasted wonderfully by the blighted lands surrounding it, or simply the menacing presence of Naxxramas and the other citadels floating over the tundras. Then take all that and put it smash face up against the cheeky little bastard that is the Grizzly Hills. Do you remember the music? What ridiculous is this in comparison to the grimy pestilence everywhere else? That was some real vanilla style design, and it was worth 2 tugs if anything was. Wrath brought in the first real in-game cutscenes to advance the story. The Wrath Gate is a must-see for any player, but good God, the real sadness, and some of you won't even know this exists until now and will never unknow it. Anyone who started in Kata, or after, is that they removed something. What is widely considered the best quest Blizz ever made. The battle for the Undercity. This was such a major moment of standing side by side with the leaders while taking the role of a wave crashing against a seemingly unstoppable enemy. A quest now lost to history for us lucky few, yet Blizz has gone to great lengths, successfully to replicate this style of moment. So yeah, they nailed the leveling experience. But this time they gave real thought to what happens after the cap, which up until now had meant players instantly porting away to begin the gear grind and maybe some dailies. Icecrown was the jewel. It was understood that most players would hit cap very, very early into Icecrown, so instead of just having it be a bunch of the usual quests for a rainy day, Icecrown had the absolute best story quest lines in the entirety of Wrath, and each step also unlocked the dailies to keep it relevant for the entirety of the expansion. Whether you were controlling Arthas himself, or in the pursuit of raising Sindragosa, or standing side by side with Darian Mograine inside the Icecrown Chapel, preparing for the inevitable storming of ICC. So if you weren't around at launch, you're probably thinking Wrath was just an incredible, incredible time. 25th of November. A date. A guild name. Soon to be called Insidia. The first mega guild, the merger of SK and Nihilum. The 2 top boys of TBC were to drop some players and become raiding gods. 66 hours into the launch of Wrath, all the raid content was dead. What? I wanted to check this forum post. It's still an MMO champion and read the hate, the vitriol. and flat out lies and crazy stories posted by the community at this moment. Now, while that in itself, I'll be honest, that's not unusual, notice the actual funny part. The thread completely dies as soon as reports came in that pugs of everyone else who had also hit level cap from various servers had also started clearing the content. Now, while the armchair uninformed bumfucks' voices were quelled until their next rage meal was prepared, those of us in the raiding world were soon to discover that something had gone very, very wrong with Wrath of the Lich King's raiding. Malygos, the great spellweaver, crushed. Sartharion dunked, and of course the return of Naxxramas, which was pretty much a welcome feature, honestly. It was the first revamped content ever, so we didn't know what was in store, and Nax was fucking amazing. Those of us who went there thought it was so good. It had a legacy all of its own, a legacy that was cultivated and fostered, mainly though by those who never went inside. Like it or not, inaccessibility breeds desire, discussion, imagination, speculation. They all run wild, just as it had done in the past. What does it feel like to actually see Ragnaros rise out of the lava? Don't get me wrong, I have no issue with content being accessible to all, but I do believe it doesn't have to be immediate and unfulfilling, so that all that excitement and anticipation is just pissed away. Nax 2.0 was a total failure in the eyes of raiders, but a success to those who lived in the pug world, while also being a nice introduction for new players.
Yeah, but the achievements, mate, they were the real challenge.
Oh yes, the new achievement feature. We needed that, and it has to be put to good use, am I right? I'm told this all the time from those with the rose-tinted team. The base raid was the easy mode. The achieves were the hard mode. Yeah, but that's literally only true for Sartharion and his 3 drakes. Hell, everyone was amazed when Method released the info that, contrary to Blizzard's statements that 10 was designed to be easier than 25, that in fact Sartharion 3 drakes 10-man was actually the most difficult challenge in Wrath of the Lich King. But that's the only one example of the achievement statement being true. I have the Immortal achievement. It's the title I wear on every character, no matter what overwhelming challenge I defeat in World of Warcraft. I love it so much. Was it hard? Not in the traditional sense. If you think to yourself, hard, is hard asking people with bad PCs or internet to stand outside the room on Thaddeus and Hygen, then yeah, it's tough, I guess. Or hoping the mind controllers don't have something happen on Vesuvius, or having to raid at midnight to cut out the huge lag in the instances, then you could call it hard. Malygos' achievement were complete bullshit. Bring a load of ranged DPS and some Death Knights, stack up sparks and go bleh. That isn't something that requires a team effort or strategy. How did this happen? How do you take something as legendary as Naxxramas and just remove its soul? Let me ask you something.
So what is a Wrath Baby?
So we asked around, and the common belief is that a Wrath Baby is simply someone who started playing WoW in Wrath of the Lich King.
Wrong.
A Wrath Baby was in fact a really derogatory term used to describe those who either loved the new Wrath model or indeed started in Wrath and never understood the hardships and trials that the now self-titled old school had been through. Wrath is a major turning point in WoW's gameplay, a turning point we are still feeling today. It was the point where overall things were made much, much easier. Tanks, for example, now had an enormous threat multiplier added that wasn't fully disclosed in a strange way. A simple Googling will find a number of sites trying to figure out exactly how huge this invisible buff was. Needless to say, if you were tanking in Vanilla or the Burning Crusade, then Wrath made it very trivial. Not to mention that all tanks now had fully working AoE abilities that were no longer limited to 2 or 3 enemies, with reducing the raid size, changing class mechanics, removing some of the more evil original mechanics, and being that the bosses were designed for a game that was years old. Yeah. Nax was pretty shitty with all these things combined. This is always the issue with revamped content, and why the new Karazhan not being a total revamp is a very exciting prospect. Old content is just that, it's old. It was designed around a different game. And as the game develops, that older content just doesn't fit into the new whole, meaning that in all likelihood, it's not going to be as good compared to when it was created. We should have seen it coming. So early on in Wrath, you were likely to be in one of 2 camps. If you were a player who'd done some well, Then Wrath became a snowfest very, very quickly. But for everyone else, it was pretty fucking awesome, honestly. The new world dailies were fantastic and equally, if not more creative than the Burning Crusade. Leaping up a mountain as a mini Mimiron robot never got old, just as helping 2 seals find the love they deserved was a welcome twist on the usual collect X reputation quests we'd seen in the past. So what about PvP, boys? Wintergrasp? So Halar was a bit...
Fucking sucked!
But not the idea of a mass battle trying to recapture the classic Alterac Valley in itself. Well, that's alright. So Wintergrasp was the next effort. An all-out assault on the fortress using tanks and well-mounted turrets, catapults, and destructible walls with the ultimate reward of super easy puggable bosses that gave PvE and PvP raid quality gear. The concept, the design, 120 v 120. So good, actually. So reality, if we can't, as a species, after a decade, convince just 10 players to not camp the middle of Warsong Gulch, then what do you think happens when you throw 240 players into a sandbox? Every now and again, there would be an amazing battle in Wintergrasp. Being on the defensive was always much more fun for me, more specifically on the defensive in a pretty evenly matched fight, but losing. The walls crashing down as the enemy tanks rolled in, flanked by troops on the ground, making that final push to the gates of the keep. Very cool. Unfortunately, most of the time there would be this enormous testicle of people just stood in front of the main gate, getting battered with turret fire, and then running back to their corpses, just waiting for someone else to do something, which would let them win, and then someone will make a group for the raid bosses. You get the idea. 100 toys to play with, but not playing is preferable to so many. Strand of the Ancients and the other new BGs. Of course, vehicle combat was back. What the fuck was going on with vehicle combat in Wrath of the Lich King? The devs seem to have such a boner for it. Malygos, Wintergrasp, Strand, Flame Leviathan, Oculus. Gotta get that vehicle combat in there. I never minded it too much, but in practice, we had those immediate flashbacks to Terran Gorfiend in the Black Temple. We all know those guys who are presented with 3 or 4 buttons and turn from some of the better players you've ever known to someone who resembles my dog with the Wii U pad. Players complained. A lot. Of what they said was endless vehicle combat. You know, the 5 cases I just mentioned. And 3 of them were PvE and 2 of them are PvP. Just endless, I say. I'm sure most of the whine was that so many just couldn't get their fancy add-ons to work when inside a vehicle. How do I track Pyrite again? So as it was the closest we got to vehicle combat, after that was tremendous and wonderful. The beautiful gunship battle. But come on. At least we got leaping from a gunship down in the enemy base as a normal function of the game. That's a win right there. And we're back in the game. The Ulduar cinematic looks dated as hell now. I can't even tell if it was intentional that his face looks like Gordon Ramsay's arse, but the little previews of what awaited us across that broken bridge we had all seen by now just looked incredible. My balls clenched when I saw that it was going to be so large it had its own train. The train ride from Stormwind to Ironforge is so good, and now we were going to have another, perhaps even better one? Titans, dragons, a mysterious presence, enormous robots, and for the first time in history, a secret, super secret, hard mode only boss. Just what the hell is this going to be? You really need to appreciate how amazing Ulduar, for a variety of reasons, was. First, the design of it. The detail on the architecture in every corner of the zone is some of the best we had ever seen. There are no bare sections that look like they could do with just a little bit here, a little bit more. Frozen halls, a forest. Just look at the scope of the room that is just for Mimiron alone. From start to finish, it played out as it should, as a full-on assault. We weren't simply strangers in a foreign land like we usually were inside a raid, but now the place was designed to play out, with us as invaders blowing down doors, disabling the outer defenses. Secondly, the voice acting. Ulduar gave us all of this.
I'm ready to play!
Your will is no longer your own.
How can you not love this? This is the best we had seen since Karazhan. The model itself. Ask yourself, how many different level of difficulties are there for Ulduar? 2. Just 2. 10 and 25. That's it. Within those 2 simple restrictions was content designed for pugs all the way up to the most hardcore players on the planet. The ability to have the choice per boss as to whether you wanted to try it harder or easier, and many stages in between for some bosses. A chance at those couple of extra decent items, or simply do it in the easier mode and do a different harder one later without just sticking the entire raid into normal, hard. It's amazing. Let's say you're a pugger. Got a bunch of low geared guys? Alright, we'll do normal mode all the way. A mixed group with some experience and some newbies? Maybe you do XT hard, but the rest normal. Or a very well geared group, we can do hard mode Leviathan, XT maybe, Thorim or Hoda. Which honestly, accessing the best loot in the game in a pug while still being able to do the whole thing normal instead is great. By today's standards, using the Ulduar model, there could simply be normal and mythic. Probably still Alpha though. It doesn't even make much sense that normal and heroic even exist anymore, when the opportunity exists to be more creative with boss design, while giving people choice. Look at Hellfire Citadel for example, using the Ulduar model. Iron Reaver could split in 2 similar to Morchok, and using artillery to switch DPS targets in a similar vein to the Twin Emperors of Ahn'Qiraj. Hellfire Council could have a different order, which we can all agree would certainly mix up the strategy, and so on and so on. We sat down and couldn't think of any reason why the Ulduar setup was a problem. But as we'll find out, yeah, it totally fucking was apparently. Despite Algalon being visually striking, yet disappointing, Ulduar cemented its place in history as one of the best raid zones they've ever created. So it was justifiable to create something people absolutely fucking hated. Just under 5 months had passed since the gem of Ulduar had appeared. We had all seen the construction of the Argent tournament grounds going on in the north of Icecrown, and then suddenly the announcement of not just another raid, but new 5-mans, and of course, a brand new set of raid options. The attempts at making everything accessible was already starting to show how hard Blizzard was having it. No matter how cool or inventive they were in opening the doors wide for as many people as possible, without making the content so trivial no one would reasonably enjoy it, nothing was working. No matter what you do, there will always be people who prefer the previous system. But Blizzard was not going to give up, not just yet. The raid and dungeon system was changed in every major patch of Wrath of the Lich King. And this time, they really screwed it up. I'm going to say it. Trial of the Crusader was a good raid. It was solid. As a one-off raid with no trash, with a quirky theme and a few interesting bosses, and yes, I even enjoyed the faction champions. It should have been a nice addition to the legendary grind we were going to do in Ulduar. Once the short progress of TOC was done, as it should do, it would take less than an hour for an experienced guild. So how do you screw that up? 4 lockouts a week! With the fancy new toggle ability, we had 10 normal, 10 heroic, 25 normal, 25 heroic. What a joke. Only if you were fully geared from Ulduar hard modes could you skip over even the normal 10-man version. Everything else was upgrades. All the while, not missing an Ulduar reset, gotta get those Valnirs. It also meant that due to the short time it took between Ulduar and TOC launch, that for a huge amount of people, Ulduar had come to an end, only to be replaced by repeated runs of Trial of the Crusader in its place. As a minor relief, the release of TOC was staggered at 1 new boss every week until finally the reinvigorated Anubarak, and once again Mr. Menethil, made yet another appearance. As a side note, this was the raid that brought the name Paragon to everyone's minds, as the guild getting the world first heroic 25 kill following a storming performance with Alone in the Darkness. TOC was a huge misstep as players were burning out fast while simultaneously putting Ulduar into the back seat. The new daily area was interesting, but it was the new 5-mans that caused the most uproar. When we went back to fully film them, I couldn't quite wrap my head around how long the RP is. It's cool and all, but it took so long before you could do anything. Once again, I'll admit, I was a fan of the jousting, and a super fan of the Black Knight being the final boss, but oh my god, those trinkets. TOC 5-man Heroic became ground zero. It was the most ninja looted place in the history of WoW. Because of an add-on.
Alright boys, I need one more DPS for Shattered Halls Heroic. You know the drill, stand together, let's have a look at you. Okay, well this is quite obvious, isn't it? One of you is exceptional. The other one looks like he needs help getting dressed in the morning. It's you, son, you've got the higher gear score, let's go.
Alright, so gear score, or just item level as you know it today, is just a commonly accepted thing, and I covered it more in depth in this video here. The takeaway is that before this cursed add-on appeared, and quite literally became as standard as a DPS meter, it changed everything. It's not as if finding groups was more friendly before this, or people didn't inspect you, etc. The difference now is that you could be flat out excluded before any dialogue was opened up. When someone says something innocent like needing 5k gear score to do a previous expansion raid or some other insane nonsense, then it's not only the people who are looking to do that content who are excluded, but everyone else who sees that message in trade and doesn't meet the requirement also gets the message that you are not good enough to join in with that content even if you wanted to. Gear score was player made though. They brought that on themselves. With Wrath, it was the great but weird decisions that created the unstable ride. Dual spec was brought into the game. Amazing! After 2 expansions being locked into specs with ever absurd prices to change and play something just a little bit different, I mean, I just want to play my character without being reamed out for it. Of course though, when dual spec did arrive, also the most ridiculous comment ever came, which was that tri-spec would never be a thing as that would destroy the RPG aspect. You see, 2 specs is fine, but 3, what about our fucking immersion? Is that a Nixia? It's a fucking revamp. Oni did come back. It was a decent revamp actually, with some nice new mechanics to combat the changes that screwed up Naxxramas, but still a weird decision considering the backlash from Nax. Maybe Oni came back as just a test to see if they added a lot of modern tweaks to the old gal, if it would work. Inscription, guild calendars, equipment managers, and of course the most requested feature of all time, trumping achievements and all the other nonsense and everything else we'd seen in Wrath, was the barbershop. Fucking barbershop.
Hey!
What? It sucks.
Don't be dissing the barbershop, mate. Yeah? You need it, fucking casual. Stick to your guides.
Transmog sucks.
Mother...
So it's time. We've done the story, we fought the masses of undead, and now we have forced Arthas from appearing in every cutscene. After all the returning players had stuck it out for so long, and ridden this roller coaster of change, it was time to descend on ICC. Which also meant, of course, changing the raid system again. But we'll get to that. This was the day, ladies and gentlemen. December 8th, 2009. This was the day the Kalawak Fishing Derby came to WoW. And LFD. As someone who was there and was a tank, I thought LFD was the shit. Instantaneous queues, and I had the gear score to carry the group, so from my very in-depth, experienced point of view, LFD was just aces, a bravura. My guild chat though kept banging on about hour-long queues, crap tanks, crap healers, wiping, and that lots of players were completely the worst players they had ever seen. Groups that couldn't even finish the dungeon. Let me try my DPS ult then. Oh no. The thing is, many would sit back today and say, well, LFD destroyed the player base, right? People just overnight became so much worse than ever before. No. The fact is, you just weren't exposed to these players before. Let's make a simple comparison. How many people refuse to make their own groups but will endlessly complain about the requirements of someone else's group? Now take all the way to players who flat out refuse to join into any other content with other players in an MMO, alright? Now take that mindset, multiply it by the time it takes to not be anonymous in any way and dedicating lots of time to finding a 5-man group as we had done previously. That is a huge amount of players who you never ever interacted with in any way whatsoever, who in all likelihood have little to no experience, and now they have an option to queue up using the minimum effort and also have anonymity to remain completely safe. Basically, LFD opened the floodgates to the apparent millions of players you never knew existed. But they always existed. I'll say it was funny to start finding people who no longer knew where the dungeon entrances were and couldn't corpse run without getting lost, after most likely causing the wipe. That was pretty funny. So while we're on the 5-mans then, the Forge of Souls, the Pit of Sauron, the Halls of Reflection have joined the dungeon list. The most interesting thing about these dungeons is that all three were a linear story, all connected together, one after the other. After the initial intrusion into ICC, we would break in, set up camp, having the initial forces imprisoned into slavery, all the while working from scout reports that the Halls of Reflection held some secret as to how to defeat Arthas. As much as I'm not a lore nerd, the big question was flying around since the announcement of Icecrown Citadel. How exactly do you defeat this bro? The 5-mans were some of the best, not only being visually interesting, but the story and culmination of Arthas, chasing you all the way to the ending. It was so cool. The twist that defeating Arthas only meant that someone else had to replace him would lead to wild speculation, mostly targeted at Tyrion to become the next Lich King. So back to yet more changes though. As TOC was intended to be a nice little side distraction but turned into a burden-laden grind fest, that it was why they had to switch it up again. Now we had a toggle, allowing players to change between heroic and normal on a boss-by-boss basis while still keeping 10 and 25 separate. So essentially, a far less creative Ulduar. This was also the culmination of Blizzard's interference with guild progression. For some reason, since the mid-Burning Crusade, Blizzard seemed to feel they owed a duty of care to players who would raid non-stop hardcore from the get-go. Why? Who the fuck knows? Limited time on Algalon, one boss a week for TOC, and ICC would have one wing released per reset, as well as limited attempts for the end of wing bosses. It was a double whammy in ICC. Probably also the point when they decided it was a dumb idea, as the hardcore of the hardcore will always find a way around it, either by soulstoning entire raids, or simply leveling and gearing multiples of their own character to test bosses before using up the attempts on their main characters. Either way, in we went, and they nailed it. This was a very big deal. Like Deathwing to Cataclysm, the expansion was built around this one zone. Personally, I always consider the visuals to have been the best part of ICC. The bosses, for the most part, were pretty lame for me as a mechanics nerd. Blood Queen, Putricide, Syndragosa, fantastic. Excluding the big man, I never got any significant memories from anything else. While Blood Princess and Valithria were some of the ones I thought were annoying, ICC overall was just a nice place to be in. None of that mattered though. No one gave a shit about the rest. It was all about Arthas, and my god. Standing on that platform for the first time, seeing him sat on the throne staring down at us, knowing it was about to go down. The countdown with Tyrion shows that even long RP doesn't have to be a chore like Saurfang. The tension surrounding those last few seconds was great, no matter how many times you wiped. I'm sure I don't need to go over how the fight plays out for anyone watching this, but what I can relate is the absolute elation and delight of that first progression kill, with Arthas floating as we all got res to bring him down, followed by Bolvar taking up the mantle, complete with a new statue in Dalaran for non-raiders to see what happens. Now for the bullshit then. The biggest outrage that came out of ICC wasn't that a discipline priest was fundamentally required to counter Arthas' most destructive spell Infest, it was when it came to the heroic modes. You see, the system still worked that 10-man was easier than 25. So there was the loot power difference. 25 got stronger loot. By this point, there was more dedicated 10-man guilds than 25. With the content being easier to play and easier to set up, that growing voice became very, very, very pissed with the perceived unfair benefits that 25-man players were getting. To really sting them in the tail though, the world first Lich King heroic 10 kills, the realm first, that the 10-man guilds have been working their balls off on, they were pretty much all done by the 25-man guilds. It was all about the precious rankings, of course, but it does seem honestly unfair that their progress, the 10-man dedicated, was stomped all over by overgeared players from 25-man just walking in and crushing it. At least we know that eventually the arguments between 10 and 25 would find harmony and peace, singing songs and sharing hot dogs at the weekend. That wasn't the end of Wrath of the Lich King raiding, though. It was also Halion. Hey everybody, this is my conclusion to the video. So there are lots of things we had to leave out of this because it's already way too long. So Flower Power, a new Barak's achievement, gotta go, that had to be dropped out, and a few other things. So don't worry, we do know about them, but I didn't think they were really relevant to the memory as most of those things got changed anyway. The focus of the end of Wrath of the Lich King was really strange. It was a period of time where in PvP, casters dominated and we had wizard cleave and overpowered trinkets and all that kind of stuff, so people were just getting blown up in PvP. In the PvE world, it was a case of just farming legendaries, getting those Shadowmoons, getting those Valnirs, just getting all these stuff for people. Mimiron's Head was a big one that we were all farming all the time, Invincible and so on and so forth. Getting all these things for everybody. And it was an ambivalent time. As I remember it, as somebody who played through the entire thing, is I remember it being an ambivalent time. Wrath of the Lich King was a strange one. It wasn't as exciting as the end of Vanilla was, where we were looking forward to this big new expansion, and then the first expansion where we'd never experienced it before, we didn't know what was going to happen, or exhausting. I genuinely did want to quit the game when Wrath of the Lich King was coming out. That is absolutely true. The beginning of this video is completely true, because it was exhausting. We had the hardest raid content ever with the Sunwell, which did nearly kill my guild multiple times. They had to take massive breaks, and it was difficult and a chore. And you had to fight through it all. And the end of Wrath of the Lich King was kind of like, we've seen this process before. The Kata trailer dropped, and instead of being like, oh my fucking god, like a lot of people who'd left the game saw when they saw it on TV, for many of us who had been through the entire expansion, it was another big bad that probably won't have any effect on the world at all. As you've probably noticed through the many WoW expansions, there's nothing really changes. And we were starting to see that, a gear reset once again, more levels, same new stuff, just repeating over. But we still loved the game. It just wasn't exciting like the Burning Crusade was. It wasn't, you know, Deathwing Burning Stormwind was cool, but it wasn't as cool as like, oh shit, Arthas is coming, or the Burning Legion. Because it had happened to us a couple of times before that. So my final memories of Wrath of the Lich King are, I could say this without a shadow of a doubt, there are far more players who remember Wrath of the Lich King as probably their favourite expansion ever. And I totally get that. Wrath of the Lich King brought a lot of things. It started the accessibility train. So a lot of people, huge amounts of people, got to experience things like raiding for the very first time, because obviously raiding was made much simpler in many ways. Gameplay became much simpler, so people weren't excluded from content anymore, right? So people who were scared to tank could go in and tank now, because that process was much easier. It was for me and my friends who would fall into like, oh, you're elitist because you used to do it the old school way, right? I made the joke about the old school in the video. No, it's just that we were playing a different game. We were playing a game where you had to do some really stupidly over-the-top hardcore things in order to get to where you wanted to go, and that was being taken away. And for many of us, Wrath of the Lich King was actually a different type of game for the first time, and that's why we always felt a little bit salty about it. I wasn't as salty as everyone else calling everyone a scrub lord or a wrath baby or anything like that. I wasn't that much of a dick, but I knew where we were coming from, which was we were used to a different kind of game. Well, I think for the vast majority of people, Wrath of the Lich King was probably their favourite ever expansion. So, as we did with the Legacy of the Burning Crusade, we have a little music video prepared for you. Mr. Ghosty's made this one. He's quite happy with it. I hope you enjoy it. And also, this video is entirely supported by Patreon. Okay, so the guys over at Patreon get this video like a week early, as well as the other legacies. Now we have 2 of us on board. We will be producing many more of these. It's a far better process, as I laboured over this one until Ghosty came in and we managed to wrap it up very quickly. So we're going to be producing hopefully one every couple of weeks. We have quite a few that are already out, so you can look at a lot of Legacy of WoW, the Burning Crusade, Vanilla, and several classes that we look at individually. So I didn't touch on Death Knights too much in this one because Legacy of the Death Knight is coming, so that'll have its own whole video to go along side by side with this one. Alright guys, so if you feel like contributing, head over there. You get a ton of extra content like blog posts. It's nothing that's excluded from YouTube. Very strict rule is that there's no like video content that doesn't appear for YouTube, okay? So we do some Q&As and things like that. Behind the scenes stuff if you're interested in any of that. So please enjoy the video that Ghosty's prepared, and I'll see you in the next Legacy, hopefully in a couple of weeks. Alright? Bye-bye.
Citizens of Dalaran, raise your eyes to the skies and observe.
I'm ready to play!
I remember you. Your will is no longer your own.
Good news, everyone!